This is Kristina Mand-Lakhiani, co-founder of Mand-Lakhiani, and welcome to my honest conversations. So thank you guys for joining. And my today's guest is Kerri Macaulay. Hi, Kerri.
Hello.
Welcome to Mind Valley and welcome to my honest conversations. We are on Mind Valley platform, but this is my show, as I like to say. And Kerri is, I'm going to read so that I don't change facts. So Kerri is, well, in the order of importance for Kerri, mom of two little Canadians,
That's right.
Host of Choose Unstoppable podcast, course creator and influence hacker, and you spend your social time on Facebook. This is a very interesting confession. Not something you hear very often. We might end up talking about that as well. I do not know. But the topic that we have announced is how to grow your influence from literally nothing to actually being heard. And I know quite a few people were commenting that they are really looking forward to this particular meeting. So I'm really glad. Kerri, welcome once again, and thank you for joining me today.
Oh, it's such an honor and a privilege. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to have this chat. I love the theme of honest conversations because I think so much is often filtered out that sometimes just having a good old chat between friends can give so much more insight than something that's, a little more formal and scripted. So I'm excited just to have a chat with you guys.
Well, it's I think I called it honest conversation as an excuse so that I can just talk the way it comes and not follow a certain agenda, if I can say so. I do give interviews from time to time, and as a person who sometimes is a guest too, I know how hard it is to have an actual conversation when the person is following the prepared questions.
Yes.
So, yeah.
I love it.
Sometimes you just have a feeling that they haven't heard what you just said.
Exactly. So, they're just waiting to say the next thing.
Yes, that's why I needed an excuse, and I called it honest conversations, and it stuck, and I've had them for over a year now. And the idea is that we do have a topic, of course, we'll talk about the topic, but the conversation sometimes can go into things which are important. And I think your topic is actually so exactly in that field, which might end up being somewhere. I mean, social media is in our everyday life. Everyone is in some way influenced by that, in good way or bad way. So we might end up talking about things which are a little more maybe controversial than just building an influence. But let's start with an influence. Why did you feel that you needed to build an audience? Because your own stories, you starting a podcast, a big podcast, competing with some big names, but you started it from not having an audience. What pushed you to do that? Because there is just as a context, all of us want to have a big audience, but it's like when I was a kid, I wanted to be a superstar because it's so cool when people recognize you on the street. Is it part of my actual life mission? Is a questionable thing. So we all want to have a big audience, the bigger the better, but actually doing and going into that, what pushed you there?
I think it's a really great place to start because an audience for audience sake doesn't really make any sense. And pure honesty, going all through the honest conversations, complete transparency. Before I built this audience, which I'm fairly new in the game. So anyone who's starting out, I'm like 15, 16 months in, and obviously I'll share with you how I was able to build success and influence quickly. But before that, I barely ever changed my profile picture. I would be on Facebook maybe once or twice a month. So I didn't have much going on in the world of social at all. My friends basically made fun of me because it just wasn't a big part of my life. But I found myself, I was a corporate person. I think this narrative will be quite familiar. I spent my whole life thinking that that's what we do. We, get a corporate job, and I, worked my way up to the top floor. I was a VP with a large multinational advertising agency. And then at 39, I had my first child. And so I thought prior to that, that was going to be my career and life was great. And then I would have a baby and I would do both and I would be incredible at it. And, you know, I bow to the people who are living that world and have managed to pull it off. I wasn't doing both very well for my own standards. And so I wanted to create a life that had more freedom for me to be home with my kids when I needed to be, but still be able to work and build towards something that I was proud of that would bring in, you know, the resources that we needed to continue with, you know, I'm so eternally grateful and blessed for the life that I had created. I wanted to be able to design it a little bit differently. And so I decided in my infinite wisdom that I would start an online business because I could do it from home. It seemed like the thing that everyone was doing. And so that's really where my journey started, was to say, okay, an online business makes sense. So I took stock of my skills. I'd been in marketing and advertising for years, not in the digital world. So I had a ton to learn. So I bought every course. I attended every seminar. I read every book, listened to every podcast. Like I basically did all the things to consume as much content and education as I could in a short amount of time. And so I started doing everything, you know, that I hate the word gurus, but the experts were teaching me to do. But I was not getting the same results that they were getting. And so I was doing the exact things they were telling me to do, except no one was liking my content. No one was clicking. No one was commenting. It was crickets. And so I started to think, okay, how is this possible? I've now learned from 5, 6, 7 different experts. They're kind of all saying similar things. So how is it when they're following these tactics and strategies, they're having, you know, wild success, but when little old me with my audience of very few, nothing at all is happening. And so that's really where I learned. I'll tell you, I had a huge aha moment. And I don't know if you ever had a moment where a light bulb goes off so big that, like, I remember where I was, I remember what I was wearing. I kind of felt it physically because I'd almost given up, truthfully. I had almost reached the point where this wasn't for me. Like, clearly it's me. Clearly I'm doing the things they're saying to do. It's not working. It's got to be something that I'm doing. Or maybe this world isn't for me after all. Maybe I need to go back and kind of rethink, maybe even go back to my corporate life. And so I had this aha moment where I realized that these experts, these gurus, they had one thing that I did not. And no matter how many tactics or strategies I was trying to implement, without that one thing, I was never going to be able to get the results that they were getting. And that one thing was influence. They had created influence. So if I were to say something and it falls on deaf ears, and Tony Robbins, for example, says the exact same thing, everybody goes wild and cheers and it's comments and it's, you know, social applause. It's because influence had been created over there. And so I started to become obsessed with this idea of influence and say, okay, I'm doing the same thing. So it's not the tactics and strategies. Yes, they're important. I'm so glad I learned them because I would have had to learn them anyway. But in the absence of influence, it's not enough. So how do I create influence fast? Like I said, I was already 39. I'd had my first kid. I'm now 45 with a 3-year-old. So I'm like an older mom of younger kids. And so I didn't have time to kind of play the long game. And so all I was hearing, so I started to research influence and follow people who had it, see what it looked like to have it and not have it. But everyone was telling me, not directly, but in trainings and in everything, everyone was telling me it takes time. You know what? It's perseverance and persistence, and over time, just keep showing up. And it can be a matter of years before you actually really are able to create, you know, like real long-lasting influence. And so
Can I ask a little question
yeah.
first?
Yeah.
So first of all, guys, if you really like something, and I see you like what you're hearing because you're saying yes, you're also welcome to leave emojis. It happens really quickly, and it's easy for both of us to actually notice that that emojis are coming in. It can be fire or whatever, or heart, whatever talks to you, and it's easy to notice and not to get distracted. If you have a question, there is a tab Q&A, and my guardian angel Luba might bring you up to ask a question directly of Kerri a little later, and I think it's a very good opportunity. Kerri, I want to get back to that because you say it takes time. I've been in business for 17 years. Of course, I wasn't in the limelight, so I can't really consider these 17 years didn't go into the time served online. But sometimes the time seems like such a stretched concept. How long is the long time? Because I'm also 43, so I understand. I understand the concept of waiting and of patience, but I also understand the concept of life and time goes in one direction only. So can you qualify that thing? It takes time.
Yeah, well, I think what I was taking away when people were telling me that it takes time was just that, I was reading into it that it was, going to be months or years before I could start to get my snowball rolling down the hill. And what I was experiencing socially and as I was, starting to build my business was a whole lot of nothing. And that means financially, that means as far as building a following and growing a following. And so I was kind of left with, okay, patience and persistence, sure, but there must be something I can do to fast track it, because years was the one thing that I didn't have to wait in order to have this happen. And I didn't know if I would be able to kind of hack my way into building influence and like with complete integrity and authority. But what I did know is that if I could figure out what it is, what the secret sauce or the formula is to building influence, then maybe I could find a way to speed it up. And so I am someone who my whole life is like driven by loopholes. Like if I can get the whole picture of something and I can find a loophole to shortcut, or, as much as I am an incredibly hard worker, if I can find a shortcut or a loophole or a way to get something done more quickly, more effectively, then I am all about it. And so that's really kind of how my brain works. And so I looked at influence and I said, okay, with all the research that I was doing, I realized that there are 4 pieces to building influence. So there's actually a formula to it. If you can demonstrate to an audience trust, authenticity, credibility, and transparency, you can build influence pretty quickly. And so something that really made the light bulb go off for me was, okay, time is not on that list. If I can find a way to demonstrate trust, authenticity, credibility, and transparency, I call it TACT because it, like, even though it is an English word, that's what the acronym happened to spell. I didn't make it up, but I shortened it down. So what I call now TACT, trust, authenticity, credibility, and transparency, if I could find a way to demonstrate those things quickly, then I could build influence. And so time is not on that list. It doesn't have to take years. It just has to take an intentional effort to demonstrate those 4 pieces. And then you can start to build influence and authority with an audience, so that when you are now applying all the strategies and tactics of how to serve, how to show up, how to do all the things from our hearts that we want to do, everybody, most people who want to start an online business, who are trying to build a following or trying to generate an audience, they just want to make a difference for people. We just want to help people and create a life for ourselves that is a match for that level of service. And so once I realized I just needed a way to demonstrate those 4 things, I kind of created a new strategy. And from there, I had 1,000 followers in 14 days. The very first day I started my email list, it was at 261 people on my list in 24 hours. And I just built it the day before, like just set it up. I was, like I said, I was completely brand new. So for anyone who's like overwhelmed by technology or overwhelmed even by the world of social media, I was right there with you. I'm really not that much farther ahead, other than just having cracked that code on that formula of how to do it. And then by the time it came to launch my podcast, I still had a small audience. I mean, I had these maybe like 1,400 followers that I built, this kind of this little following. I had a few hundred people on my email list. And when I launched Choose Unstoppable, which is my podcast, we skyrocketed straight to number 3 in the entrepreneurship category on iTunes. 10 months later, we were new and noteworthy, but all because I was able to really build trust and to do it authentically, to show my credibility. So rather than talking about all the things I can do for my audience, actually showing them and actually demonstrating my skill sets so that they can actually see me having success and having wins with the very things that they want to do. And then being completely transparent about it. When I'm having a bad day, when I'm having, when nothing's working, when things are blowing up, I talk about that just as much as I talk about any of the successes and the wins, because that's what the journey looks like.
So I think I'm going to ask a lot of those kind of questions. What is this? What is that?
Yeah, please.
So you talk about influence. How much is this connected to actually the size of audience? I'm really sorry. It might be like a redundant question, but I understand that you are not using those terms interchangeably at all. When you talk about influence, what exactly does it mean?
So influence is really the ability to move an audience and to attract an audience. So I would say, for the sake of the conversation we're having today, an audience is the people wherever they may be. So whatever social platform on your email list, they're the actual bodies that are there listening. And the influence is the ability to attract them, the ability to move them, the ability to serve them in a way that they can hear you, that they trust you, that they like you, that they know you, in order to ultimately, if it's a fit for them, do business with you.
I'm asking that because I can think of quite a lot of influencers, at least on Instagram. Podcast is not really my area of expertise, but at least on Instagram, who are not exactly epitomes of your acronym of TAG.
No.
Yet they do have an influence, and that's a little bit frustrating.
I absolutely agree. And honestly, in the beginning, that's really all I was seeing. It's like, how is it that these people are having all of this? But even if you break it down, they are, an influencer, first of all, has become a thing. Like, we now attach a certain stereotype to when we hear that, to what an influencer might be, but it still comes from the root word of influence. So influence, kind of the core philosophy, that the ability to move or persuade or to encourage someone to take a particular action or feel a particular feeling, or the influencers, believe it or not, are doing those things. They are building, they may not be for us, but they have an audience who genuinely like them and they are following them. And so one thing I always encourage, especially any of my clients, or that I encourage any of my audience, is that being authentic to yourself is the most important piece, because those influencers, they are being potentially authentic to themselves, but there is an audience for them. And there will be an audience for you, and there will be an audience for everyone listening here. There just is. The more true to ourselves, the good, the bad, the ugly, we are willing to be, the more attractive we become. I mean, not necessarily in the physical sense, but kinda. The more authentic people are, the more attractive we become to other people. Because if we're willing to show every side of ourselves, people can sigh a little bit and say, oh, you know what, me too. And if she can do it, then I can do it. And so I talk a lot about authenticity being the access to growing an audience, because if we're so perfect, like some of these you know, you think about like the Kardashian kind of Instagram page versus if you watch me on social media, you know, there's sometimes I'm just a hot mess, like truly. But in my life, there are many days that I'm just a hot mess. And you know what? Probably you too. And probably the people who I vibe with. And so I want my audience to say, if she can do it, I can do it too. I don't want my audience to say, oh, well, of course, Kerri can. She's got this perfect life, this perfect supportive husband, these angelic children that are just always like photoshopped and like with a bucket and spade in the sand. Like, no, I also share about them, you know, with their hair a complete mess and they're having like we're doing real life. And so that's really what that's really for me what allowed tact, authentic sharing, and then just showing what success looked like for me, how I can help my clients through that roller coaster. And that starts to build credibility and trust, because people can say, hey, I am like her. And if she can do it, maybe I can do it too.
I want to get back. You know, it's interesting that you mentioned authenticity, because I thought that my attempt to be authentic was the reason why it's hard for me to grow my audience. And now I'll try to explain why do I say that. You just said that, you know, even if we don't relate to some of the influencers on Instagram, they do have the audience for whom that is exactly what they're looking for their kind of authenticity. So there is clearly this thing that, you know, certain things and certain topics attract big audiences. If you talk about business or marketing, it is, well, I've been in the business for a long time. I know for a fact it's way easier to attract audience on such topics, topics of making money, or topics of losing weight, or topics of love and sex. You know, the pillars, versus if you are talking about something which is not so massively popular, like just even talking about the authors in Mindvalley. Some of the authors I really love. I think they're genius. I think they're the best. Their courses are the best, but their topic is just not the topic. So it's easier to sell certain programs, which I think are maybe simpler compared to other programs, which I think are so incredible, but the topic is just too narrow. So how much do you have to compromise? And when I went on social media, I sometimes had advice given to me which felt so against my nature. So I've sold my soul on Instagram a few times. It was in the past. So how do you find this balance between actually speaking your language and being yourself versus what does grow your audience, and sometimes you have to do because you have to do?
It's so beautifully put. And I think, you know, anyone who's been on social media can completely relate with this idea of selling our soul. And, you know, we're trying to do the things that people are telling us to do. And I was on that hamster wheel. I would try this thing and it wouldn't really feel great, but that's what they said you needed to do. And that didn't really work. So I would try this thing. So I looked like a bit of a psychopath on social media in the beginning, because I was trying different things and none of them really fit me. And so here's what I've learned. And again, I am just starting to build momentum. I am eternally grateful for the pace at which it has gone. But the reason I think that is because we have to remember one absolutely critical thing about, if we want to build an audience on social media, is that it's all about what our audience wants to hear. And that doesn't mean we go against what we believe. But I have, like, I'm actually in Costa Rica for a few months, but if I was in my office right now, I have Post-its like all around my wall on my desk that says, you know, what does she need? What does she want to hear? What's the one thing I could tell her today? Because whether we're talking about, if your niche is knitting, whether it's about cooking, whether it's about gardening, whatever the niche is that isn't necessarily one of the more kind of sexy or mainstream topics, they still have problems that they need to solve. And so I spend so much time with my audience, and I encourage all of my clients, regardless of niche, to spend time with your audience, whether it's in Facebook groups, forums, whatever that is, because they have problems that they need solving. And so if I've been gardening for 14 years and I know that I have this incredible gardening course, I don't know why I picked gardening. I'm not a gardener, so this analogy is not going to make me look good at all. But let's just say I have this incredible gardening course. I then just need to understand what is it that they love about gardening? What is their biggest problems inside of gardening? And then create a social, I call it a journey, but take your audience on this journey through solving those problems with them. Like, what do gardeners think is funny? Maybe gardening jokes, or I'm not sure, like gnomes that like show up all over the house. I don't know what it would be, but get to know that. I mean, oftentimes we are our niche. I think there was a stat that's like 90% of people who start an online business are their ideal customer, their ideal audience, but like 2 or 3 years later, 12 months later, 24 months later. So most of us understand them pretty well and can relate to them. So serve them in a way that is your page and your content is for them. And I think then if you're solving their problems in a way that you're talking about things that they love, we can often think, we should be doing things the way we think, or what are we really passionate about, or what do we really like? But that's, then that's not for them. So I remind myself truly constantly if I'm trying to think like, what can I send out to my email list today? I don't know what I'm going to say, or what am I going to say on my page today? We all get to that point. It's like, well, it's not about me. So I just turn the tables and say, I'll just go in and read a handful of comments, or I'll go into a group and be like, oh, here's what she needs. Like, my avatar is a she. I'm sure tons of us do this avatar work. As soon as I flip the question, I have hundreds of ideas. I can just read one comment and be like, oh, they're really struggling with this, or someone out there is really struggling with this. I could talk about that. And so content creation for me now, as soon as I make that flip, is just a non-issue, because I can turn social media on for a hot second and say, oh, here's how I could serve them. Same if you're a gardener. I guess we're going to stick with the gardening analogy. You could go into a gardening forum and you could just read a few comments and be like, oh, here's something I could do to serve, and go and do a Facebook Live. Like, so your content is all out there. The problems are all out there. And so you're building trust, you're building authenticity, you're building credibility. And, if you also share how your flowers didn't bloom sometimes, if you're also a gardener who struggles and things happen, then people say, oh, me too. And then you can talk about how you bounce back from that. Here's what I did to fix it. So showing the whole gamut is engaging and is alluring and is attractive. And then by the time people are consistently watching you, when it's time to do business, or when they do want a gardening course, or they do want a book, or they do want a guide, or they do want something, you become the natural, obvious person to turn to.
It's actually interesting you brought to this. I want to say, I want to ask Luba to actually see if the person with the most liked question, we're doing it here now, most liked question, is ready to come up and ask the question directly to Kerri. Meanwhile, while this is happening, I want to go back a little bit, and maybe we should have started from that. So how important this part of our business really is, because you said when the time comes to doing business, but if you're in business, every day is the time to do business. And those people who do business not just in, let's say, not necessarily authors or coaches whose business is talking, essentially, they often don't have, it's an extra burden for them to actually create content and to talk. How much, probably right now the answer will be a little different, considering we've all been online rather than in the physical world. So building an influence, who is it for? Is it for the talkers, or is it for anyone who is essentially doing their own thing and not working in an office?
I think it's a really beautiful question, because those of us who are introverted or who want to stay off of social media, I mean, I think the principles and the philosophy of tact, of trust, authenticity, credibility, transparency, they work out in the real world. And I think that, building, the know, like, and trust factor, all of that works offline as well. But if we're talking about the power of building a social audience, and I think it's hard to avoid these days, unless you're in a retail store with a whole lot of traffic and you don't need any online presence. But if you're someone who wants someone who is online to do something, to do anything, whether it's to buy a cupcake online and order it for a birthday party, or to buy an online course, if you know your audience is online, then it's much easier to build an audience also online, because that's where they already are. And then if you want them to take an action that is also online, meaning visit my webpage, download my freebie, buy my course, or buy my skirt, or buy my jewelry, or whatever, buy my gardening tools, whatever the things may be, if you're looking to influence people online, to take an action, having an audience online ready and waiting and already trusting you, knowing you, liking you, feeling a connection with you, makes it much easier, in my
Kerri, we'll get to the waiting part, but we have Jamie right now with us. Hello, Jamie.
Hi, Kerri.
Yes, I'm going to switch off my microphone so that I don't add extra noise, and I'll pass the virtual microphone to you now.
Thanks.
Thank you. Well, thank you both. This has been really awesome listening to you so far. My question is, how do I know what platforms will get me more of the right kinds of followers the fastest without spending hours a day on all of them trying to figure it out?
Such a good question. It's funny because it loops back, Jamie. I don't know if you're here at the very, very beginning, but Kristina noticed that in my Insta bio, which you'll notice I have 13 friends on Instagram. I think I have more since I started building my following, but only because people find me there. I do very little. I should extraordinarily little on Instagram, not because Instagram isn't effective. But here's the thing. The reason I say my social following is on Facebook is because I call myself an influence hacker. People look me up on Instagram. They're like, oh, you have 13 followers. So I'm just like, hey, I promise I'm legit. Just head over to Facebook for a second. But the thing is that the most important question to answer is, where is your audience? And I think we can all like instinctively say, well, obviously. And then the second, so that's the first most important question. The second most important question is, what are you most comfortable and familiar with? And then my advice always is pick one. Pick one of the big ones, because there's plenty of people on Instagram for you to build a wildly engaged audience. There's plenty of people on Facebook for you to build a wildly engaged audience. I would say some clients that come to me and they've already got big established audiences in several places. Great. Let's use all of that. If we're starting from scratch, I was starting from complete nothing. I hadn't updated my profile picture in 4 years, something nothing. And so from there, I just picked one. And I chose Facebook because it was the one that I kind of could fumble my way through to figure out. I do find that people who try 2 or 3 at the same time, what ends up happening is, it's not that you can't, it's not that it wouldn't be effective. People end up getting overwhelmed. There ends up just being too much to manage. And we're trying to do several things well. It's like we're trying to get 3 plates spinning on the stick. I hope you guys know what analogy I'm talking about. Instead of just getting one going and then starting the next one. And I'm a big proponent of that. If we're trying, I could, also juggle balls. If we're trying to juggle 3 balls versus just toss one in the air, before we've learned that, it just makes it so much harder. And honestly, the real truth is, more people will give up more quickly when it's not that they didn't have a great idea, or it's not that it wasn't for them.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I appreciate it a lot. So focus.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Yeah. Unless you're already, juggling a lot of balls. Am I allowed to say that on live television? I don't know.
We moved from gardening to juggling, but I know. All right, thank you.
You're so
Jamie,
welcome.
thank you for joining us. Oh, by the way, wait, don't leave yet. Don't leave yet. I have to take a picture. I have to report on Instagram. Okay, everybody made a good face for a change. Sometimes I take a picture when people are talking, which is unfair. Thank you, Jamie. Kerri, I want to get back to people waiting for you. So I've been trying to build an influence on Instagram for a few years. It happened out of curiosity, not out of necessity. But what I've noticed is that, and that comes with my experience actually of email lists, because I started my journey in entrepreneurship and marketing, in marketing actually. And 10 years ago, I used to speak about email lists and building a relationship with the audience. It was a long time ago. But what I know from those days and what I've noticed now on Instagram is that old audiences are sometimes a little like old dogs, slow to move, if I can say so. The bigger, the older, the less engaged they are. So how do you make sure that they are actually waiting for you, for you when the business comes?
So sorry, just so that I'm clear, are you saying like an older audience? Can you just, what was the question?
Yes, I was probably joking a little too much around.
Yeah, that's
what I'm
okay.
trying to say is that the bigger, older audiences are less engaged, and it's one thing building the size of an audience. The other thing is actually being that audience being usable for business. And I'm sorry for using this language.
Yeah, no. I just wanted to make sure I understood the question. So, I mean, the age-old advice, which I absolutely agree with as well, is to you're building your audience on social, but then you're transferring them onto your email list. Like, we're always building this asset. And I think anyone who's kind of been around these conversations, certainly for yourself, but even for those of you listening, we hear this all the time. Like, yes, a social following is great, but an email list is our asset, and it's a very important business asset. So I do encourage, and I always teach that as like while we're building that following, we're creating that connection. We've got people. I don't want to say, I was going to say on the hook, but we've got people, we've got their eyes and their ears to serve them and to bring them over to your email list, so that if the algorithms are, not being friendly, if they stop serving it up to certain audiences, if people go on vacation for a couple of weeks and they're not clicking on your content, all of a sudden they're not going to see it in their feeds anymore. So much can happen. So I'm always encouraging, especially, my audience and my clients, to consistently be, yes, encouraging people to be a part of your social audience, but still bringing them over onto your email list, so that you have a way to stay in touch no matter what their social practices may be. But if you are creating content for them, specifically designed for them, like, so inevitably there's going to be questions probably here, whether we have a chance to get to them or not, on, should it be a Facebook business page? Should it be a business group? Should it be there's lots of different ways to do it. I used a business page for, there's tons of pros and cons that, make it quite a specific question. But we all know, many of us know, that the algorithm on a business page isn't that great, and that people would have to be coming back to check in almost to build an engaged audience. But if we are giving our audience content that they really count on, that really is designed for them, that really serves them, they're much more likely to be like, oh, I haven't gone and checked in on what's going on with Kerri. So when I first started this, my whole journey, I said, okay, my whole background was in online and marketing, and I'd done a ton of research on how to, how was I going to teach people? How was I going to translate my skill set into the digital world? So what I'm going to do that I think my audience, so my audience was new or struggling entrepreneurs, which at the time I was, and I was very transparent about that. So, this practice, building influence, can be if you're brand new, if you're an expert, or if you're, someone who's using third party, you're, like the journal style. It can work in any ways, but I was brand new. And so I said to my audience of, barely any, and then I started going into Facebook groups and sharing about what I was doing. But I said, hey, look, I have had enough of trying to figure out and trying to wait for the perfect time on how to start this business and how to build an audience. I am declaring publicly, I'm starting an online business, and I'm going to do a complete backstage pass. So I'm going to do a behind the scenes of the good, the bad, the ugly. I'm going to share exactly what that looks like day in and day out from someone who's starting from nowhere. And you could surely see from my social presence, I was starting from nowhere. Who wants to join? Who wants to watch along? And I knew that that's something my audience would want, because I wanted it. Mm-hmm. And so that was what I offered. And so that's how I started my content, is like my very first video that I ever did, my very first live, it is still on my page. If you scroll like down for days, it was titled, This was a Terrible Idea. And it was titled, This is a Terrible Idea, because it was 3 days after I'd made this declaration and this promise, because I barely got out of bed. I was like, what have I done? I just told everybody I'm going to do this, and now they're going to watch me. I have no idea what I'm doing. This was so ridiculous. Like, I'm supposed to be positioning myself as some kind of expert. Now everyone's like going to know. And so I didn't say anything for 3 days. And then it was like 9 o'clock at night, and I turned the camera on, and it was called This Was a Terrible Idea. And I said, look, for the last 3 days, I've been like berating myself, talking about how why have I done this? Like, now I'm like completely accountable. I don't even know where to start. Who am I to tell somebody, watch me try to figure this out? Who am I to do this? And I just told it like it was. And then I said, but you know what? I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to figure it out, and we're going to figure it out together. And today I don't have the answers, but what I do know is that I told you I was going to show up. And so here I am, it's 9 o'clock, and all I have to say so far is I barely got out of bed for 3 days because I've been beating myself up, but tomorrow's another day. And so I'm going to get started. And so people genuinely love that kind of content as much as when I say, I just got to number 3 on iTunes in 24 hours. Like, and so everyone's celebrating with me. But that is just as meaningful content. The success stories are just as meaningful content as me saying, I feel like a fraud. I feel like I cannot believe I've asked anyone to peek behind my curtain, because there ain't nothing here. So it's important to share all of that with them in mind, because I know that they felt that way. I know that anyone who's tried to start anything has felt like an imposter, has felt like, who am I to try to do this? Has felt like, there's so many people doing this better than me. And that comes back down to just being really authentic and building, and it built tact fast. Like, my first video was like so tact building, I didn't even know it at the time.
I think that's who am I to do that is a very, very interesting topic to come back to. But meanwhile, Luba, do we have anyone who wants to ask a question?
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes. And thank you for joining us. And I'm going to traditionally pass the microphone over to you.
Yes, thank you so much. Greetings from Finland, by the way.
Hello.
Yes, so my question is, there is basically this idea or advice that in business, you should always start with your friends, that they make the first customers, so-called. And I was wondering, like, if you don't have this friend support, or you don't have the circle who would support you in the beginning, so where can you get this so-called early actives or followers?
So I don't know so much if I agree with the friends starting out, unless you happen to have the perfect, like if all of your friends happen to be your audience, like if they all want the thing, if you're the gardener, sorry to keep gardening, and all your friends are gardeners, then maybe you can start to test it out and try it out with them. And I think that's great. But otherwise, listen, I grew on Facebook, but I chose Facebook specifically because of Facebook groups. Facebook groups to me are like this gold mine of people already so niched down. So there isn't any, I say niche, I'm from Canada. I know many people say niche. So I'll switch between the two every once in a while. So many people niche down. In their business, as is a great practice, but there's a Facebook group for everybody. Like, I have yet to find a client, and I've had people come with some wild and crazy niches, but I've yet to find no community anywhere for it. So I go into Facebook groups, and then because I built my audience on Facebook, it's not a big ask for me to say, hey, you're already on Facebook, come on over to Pinterest. Like maybe that would be a big ask, but if I'm just asking them to, join my following or to start to share with them. So I built, I have a free gift for all you guys at the end called How I Built 1,000 Followers in 14 Days. And it is literally step by step exactly what I did to get that first 1,000 followers. And part of it was I started with Facebook groups. And, there's tips and tricks in there about, because obviously Facebook groups, this is not a place to go and disrespect other people's groups. And, there's ways to post and there's ways that we're, not allowed to post, nor do we want to come off that way. So I show a very ethical way, in my opinion, to find your crew, to find your people by going into Facebook groups and inviting people to follow along with your journey. It's all about creating something so exciting and enticing for them that they can't wait to see what's going on over there. And so that's where I would start. So what's your niche or niche? I don't know how you say it in Finland.
I think niche.
Niche. Okay.
I don't know. Depends.
Niche. What's your niche?
I don't have a business yet, but what I was planning is to combine mental health and technology and raise awareness in that field and advise kind of people in the technology field to take more care of their mental health and kind of involve also personal growth. I don't know if that's a niche or a broad subject, but that's something that I'm really interested in forwarding and making in the future. soon.
Yeah, I think it's beautiful. And I'm sure it's very needed, as is, mental health support in many industries. But where I would start, if you were starting completely from scratch, is I would start to go in to some of these technology groups and just start to ask them questions about your topic, ask them questions about if they're struggling with mental health or what kinds of things, or, just say if people aren't willing or wanting to talk about it publicly, just say, look, I'm doing a little research. Is there a few people here who would be willing to chat with me about this? And then you can find a way to understand them, so you can find a way to serve them best. I mean, when we're talking about mental health, it's different than saying who wants a gardening book or who wants to talk about gardening, because, gardeners don't have any, stigma around talking about gardening, at least not that I know of. Whereas mental health, maybe they do. So there might be some nuances. So the first place to start is just to start to go in and really understand, what help do they need? What problems do they have that my skill set can actually help solve? And then once you've matched those two things, your skill set with their problems, people are going to want to hear what you have to say, especially if you say, come on over to my page where my skill set and your problems are a match, and it's a very low commitment to start. So in the beginning, we're not even asking for an email address. We're not asking them to buy our gardening book or our course. We're just saying, hey, come on over. I've got, come and follow me over here where I'm going to be providing you with great value and great content. And so it's easy for them to say, sure, I can join that group or I can follow that page.
Okay, thank you. That was actually really, really great advice. I'm super happy. Thank you so much.
Okay, you're so welcome. Nice
Thank
to
you,
meet you, Julia.
Julia. I believe that would be the more Finnish way of pronouncing your name, right?
Yeah.
Julia. I'm really international person, so it's whatever fits.
Well, being
or Julia.
Estonian, I would like to introduce people to another concept of pronouncing.
Yeah, but there's a tricky question in here because I'm half Russian, half Finnish, so it's both ways.
So thank you for joining us and for asking your question.
Thank you.
And Kerri, you just mentioned a gift, and since we don't have much time left, I think that's now the right time for you to explain what you meant.
Yeah. So part of my journey was my very first kind of success point was once I'd had this realization, I was able to build 1,000 or grow 1,000 followers in 14 days after, months, if dare I say, like years of not even close to 1,000 followers. So if you're someone that's listening who has been trying and trying and trying, I feel your pain. I hear you. And so the very first freebie I ever gave to my audience, who I knew were struggling with the same things that I was this guide called How I Grew 1,000 Followers in 14 Days. And they had been watching me. So this is kind of like a meta conversation for you. They had been watching me have this success. And then I turned around and said, hey, would you like to do this too? So think about your own niche if you're Finnish, and think, what could I show my audience that I can do that they really want to do? And then I can show, whoa, look at Kerri, she just built an audience really fast. I want to build an audience really fast, so that then when I turn around and say, hey, who wants a guide on how to build 1,000 followers in 14 days? They know that I can do it because they just watched me do it. And so they say, well, yeah, you're the person I would like to learn from. And so that's the guide that I have for you guys. So for anyone here who is starting new, or even just wants to grow beyond where you are quickly, then I have this guide. My website is kerrimacaulay.com, and the guide is kerrimacaulay.com/audience builder. And that's for anyone who wants the step-by-step. It really is truly step-by-step. I'm also, one other piece of advice I'll give is, like, provide so much value in the beginning, in the early days. Provide so much value that people are like, they feel like they just, were able to, like, they just like made out like a bandit, that they can't believe they're getting this kind of content for free. Not even in the beginning always, but just as you're building that rapport with an audience, you want to serve big. I know we hear a lot about that, but then I'm not one to hold back. And so this guide truly is, there's so much in there. People tell me I should charge for it all the time.
Kerri, people are asking for a link, so maybe you can actually...
Oh yeah, do you want me to just pop that in there? Yeah, that would
in the chat. And while Kerri is typing in the link, since the time has already come for us to draw the curtain soon, I want to traditionally ask you guys who were and still are attending this live call to leave a heart for my guests, for Kerri, in the comments. Of course, the link will get lost a little bit, but you should be able to grab it when it comes.
I'm sure they'll find it.
And those who are listening to this call in recording, I'll drop a link in the description if Kerri shares it with Luba. And yeah, leave your heart also in the comments. So guys, great thanks for joining me today, and joining me and Kerri, and for asking questions, and for taking active part in this conversation. Maybe I'll improve and give the word to more people in the future, but so far 2 has been my record. I like to talk myself. Kerri, thank you so much for joining and for so generously sharing your wisdom and your experience with us.
You're so welcome.
Yes, so great thanks to everyone, and we're done for today. And Luba, if you're ready, you can draw the curtain. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much. Thanks so much, Kristina. It's been wonderful.